They watched the old man at the gate, his worn wallet trembling like a diner cup at dawn. The agent scoffed, pressed him with rules, and the crowd chuckled. He was cornered by paperwork more than people. Still, a faint coin caught the light, no bigger than a button pause, and the hush turned into something else when the marshal stepped forward. Quiet men leave echoes too, and this one began with a token raised in silence. The morning line at the airport moved with the slow rhythm of tired shoes on tile. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, pale and unforgiving. A gray-haired veteran's shoulders, still square despite the years, stepped forward to the podium. He slid his ID across the counter with the careful patience of a man who had shown documents his whole life. The young TSA agent picked it up, eyebrows rising, as if he'd uncovered a relic. "This card expired before smartphones did," he said, voice pitched just loud enough for the line to hear. A couple of passengers chuckled. Someone behind him sighed and shifted their bag. The sound cut sharper than any order he'd once followed. The old man didn't answer. He kept his hands folded on the worn handle of his duffel. His ID card, frayed at the edges, caught the harsh light and reflected back at him like a mirror he'd rather not look into. "Sir," the agent continued, tapping the plastic edge against the podium. "Rules are rules. We can't just wave you through." The veteran's eyes lowered. The background chatter softened until all he heard was the hollow buzz of the lights above and the distant airport PA dinging out some gate change. For a moment the crowd blurred. Only the card remained sharp in his sight, glowing under the fluorescent glare. Still, he kept his tone steady. "I served with that card in my pocket." The agent smirked. "Not serving here." He slid the ID back with 2 fingers, the motion Neat practiced. A woman in line leaned sideways to another passenger. "Some folks just don't keep up." Their whisper carried like a verdict. The veteran didn't defend himself. He pressed his lips thin, lifted the card, and tucked it back into his wallet. The wallet itself carried more than money. Inside, pressed between old receipts, a dull coin rested, the edge of it flashing when he moved. But he snapped the leather shut before anyone noticed. The line shifted impatiently. Shoes scraped. Someone muttered about missing connections. The veteran drew a breath, slow and measured, and let it out through his nose. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He just stood steady while the crowd's restlessness gathered like static around him. The TSA agent leaned forward, lowering his voice now. "Sir, you'll need another form of ID, or we'll be stuck." The veteran gave the faintest nod. Silence hung between them, thick as the white light overhead. Behind him, the line stalled, a dozen passengers caught between irritation and uneasy respect. The shuffle of bags grew louder. The air itself seemed to wait for something to happen, but nothing did. Not yet. The queue barely shifted. Suitcase wheels clattered, voices rose and fell like distant static. The veteran stood in the same square of tile, his duffel at his feet, as the agent pressed him once more. "Sir, we need you to step aside. Others are waiting." He shook his head slightly, not with defiance but with resolve. "I've waited in longer lines than this," he said, voice steady. A few passengers muttered. One, impatient and sharp, whispered just loud enough, "He's holding up the line again." The words slid through the crowd like a gust of cold air. The veteran's fingers slipped into his wallet, as if to steady himself. Leather creaked softly. For a moment, between bills and cards, a coin glimmered faintly in the harsh light, its edges worn smooth from years of pocket carry. He closed his hand over it quickly, unseen breath deepening. The line, the noise, the judgment all pressed in, but he anchored himself with that small weight. The agent exhaled. "Sir, this isn't optional. Step aside or we'll have to call someone." "I'll wait my turn," the veteran replied. The crowd shifted restless. Suitcases scraped. A child whined, then quieted. Still, he did not move. His silence wasn't stubbornness, it was endurance, the same kind he'd learned years ago, waiting through orders he didn't always understand. The agent leaned closer, his words clipped. "Sir, rules are rules. Respect is a rule too," the veteran said. Voice quiet but carrying. A pause spread across the line. The shuffle of bags slowed. The agent frowned, uncertain. But tension returned in a blink. The PA system chimed a hollow ding, announcing a boarding call far down the terminal. The crowd buzzed, louder, nerves fraying. The mutter of, "He's holding up everything," repeated like a chorus. The veteran straightened slightly shoulders, lifting hand still closed around the coin in his pocket. He didn't show it, not yet. Instead, he drew a breath, eyes forward, and let the pressure wash over him. "Sir," the agent said again, sharper, "now step aside or you'll miss everything." The words hung heavy, more than procedural, almost like a verdict. The line froze, waiting, and the veteran, steady as a post, beneath the fluorescent glow, did not move. The line finally thinned. The veteran moved to a side area near the gate. A hum of coffee machines hissed in the corner cafe, mingling with echoes of boarding calls. He set his duffel down by his chair, the fluorescent light still too sharp, too watchful. A youth across from him shifted nervously, backpack at his feet, earbuds dangling but silent. The boy's eyes caught a brief glint from the veteran's wallet as he pulled it out to check for other ID. Just a flash, an old coin, edges worn like it had survived more miles than most planes ever would. The youth hesitated, then leaned forward. "Sir, did you serve?" The veteran looked up, steady, no hurry in his response. He gave a slight nod. "Long ago." Something softened in the air. Around them, murmurs and shuffles blurred into background noise. The boy sat straighter, voice lowered in respect. "I figured. That coin, it's not just decoration, is it?" The veteran tucked the wallet back, fingers brushing leather closed. He didn't explain, not fully. "Some things just travel with you." The barista set a paper cup on the counter with a hollow clack. The youth, awkward but sincere, offered, "Can I get you a coffee on me?" The veteran's lips curved faintly. "Airport coffee's tough on heroes. Guess it keeps us awake." The boy grinned, shaking his head at the gentle humor. "Maybe it does." He returned with 2 cups, setting one in front of the old man. Steam curled upward, carrying the bitter scent that seemed to fill every terminal in America. The veteran took it carefully, warming his hands more than drinking. His gaze wandered to the departures board. Letters flickered, flight numbers rolled. He drew a long breath, chest lifting shoulders, lowering with the weight of quiet patience. Still, memory pushed through. He thought of another board decades ago, a diner's chalk menu with free refill for servicemen scrawled crooked in white. A waitress sliding a cup toward him with a smile that made the world steadier. That memory lingered now, bridging him back to hope. The youth noticed the pause, the distant look. "Sir," he asked gently. The veteran turned back, steady as ever. "I'm fine. Just thinking." The boarding call echoed again overhead. People shuffled closer to the gate, announcements spilling across the speakers with metallic clarity. The boy leaned forward, voice firmer now. "Someone higher up needs to see this." The words cut through the hiss of coffee steam and the shuffle of suitcases hanging in the air like a decision not yet made. The air around the gate was brittle, stretched thin by impatience. The veteran still stood in place, his expired ID trembling faintly between his fingers. Behind him, a row of restless travelers shifted bags and muttered about missed connections. The TSA agent's tone sharpened rehearsed words of authority delivered with an edge. "Sir, regulations are clear. This ID expired years ago. You'll need to step aside." The line groaned audibly. One man muttered about delays. A mother hushed her child with irritation. It felt as though every sigh was directed at the veteran pressing him down. He lowered his gaze, the fluorescent light bouncing cold against the frayed plastic of his card. He was slammed by regulation, the kind of blow not physical, but procedural, a wall of printed rules pinning him in place. And then came a voice, low, deliberate, but carrying the kind of weight that turned a room. "Hold a moment." The shuffle of bags stopped. Heads turned. Even the scrolling flight board seemed to pause. From the edge of the concourse, an Air Marshal stepped forward. Plain clothes neatly pressed his badge, flashing just long enough to silence argument. The TSA agent straightened instinctively, words catching mid-protest. The Marshal walked slowly, each step measured as though he were entering a courtroom rather than an airport gate. His eyes went directly to the ID still in the veteran's hand, then down to the coin that had slipped partly into view. Worn smooth, the metal glinted under the harsh lights. Recognition flickered across the Marshal's face, recognition of something more permanent than dates printed in ink. He stopped in front of the agent, voice calm but resonant. "I know this service. I know what it represents. He's earned his passage." Passengers exchanged glances, their earlier impatience now tempered by something unspoken. The TSA agent tried again, half-heartedly. "But sir, the regulation." The Marshal lifted his chin. "Regulation pinned him here. My nod lifts it. Open the gate." For a moment, the only sound was the hum of fluorescent lights. Then came the sharp, mechanical beep of the scanner as it reactivated. A latch clicked crisp and undeniable. The gate doors swung open on polished hinges, light spilling wide across the threshold. The veteran inhaled deeply, the breath catching, before settling steady. His hand loosened around the coin, as if its weight had finally been acknowledged by someone else. That small act, the Marshal's recognition, had restored a dignity eroded by paperwork and forgotten expiration dates. Silence held the terminal. It wasn't an empty silence, but one heavy with witness. Travelers who had scoffed now looked down, chastened. Others leaned forward, bowed as though not to miss the rare sight of fairness arriving in time. Then it began, a single clap from the back of the line. It was tentative at first, like testing the air. Another followed, firmer. Within seconds, polite applause filled the space. Not wild cheering, but the kind of respectful acknowledgement given at small-town parades when the flag passes by. The veteran did not smile widely, did not wave. He simply stood straighter, chin level, the lines on his face deeper in the glow of the open gate. The Marshal turned once more, his words carrying with finality. "This man has already earned passage." And just like that, the weight shifted. What had been a scene of humiliation was transformed into one of recognition. The open gate stood behind him, no longer barrier, but invitation. The sound of the gate latch had barely settled before the applause swelled again, warmer this time, filling the concourse with a rhythm not unlike a small-town choir. Shoes scuffed against tile as passengers paused their own journeys to lend their hands. A woman near the window wiped at her eyes, whispering something about her father's service. A young man clutched his boarding pass tighter, as though remembering a grandfather's stories. The veteran did not raise his voice or hand. He simply held the coin a little higher, its edge catching the airport's bright white light. For a moment, the token was no longer hidden in a wallet or clenched unseen. It was a witness in plain view. The crowd recognized it for what it symbolized. Duty carried quietly. Sacrifice acknowledged silently. The public address system hummed to life, its tone softer than before. A voice carried across the speakers, measured and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the airline and this terminal, we'd like to thank this gentleman for his service." A hush followed, then renewed applause, steadier and longer than the first. Strangers who had sighed impatiently minutes earlier now clapped with sincerity. A boy near the front raised his small hands to mimic the adults, his claps offbeat but full of intent. The echoes bounced against glass walls and metal beams, ringing like an old hymn in a church hall. One traveler leaned toward another, saying quietly, "Back home, our choir fills the sanctuary this same way." The comparison drew nods, a connection made between this bustling terminal and the remembered calm of Sunday gatherings. Another passenger, older and stooped, murmured, "Feels like when they added his name to the library board." "Something you don't forget." His voice cracked a little, and he clapped harder, as though to seal the memory in place. The veteran lowered his gaze, letting the applause wash over him without reply. He bowed his head slightly, not in defeat, but in a humility that had always defined him. Silence was his answer, and it was enough. The coin rested in his palm, polished by years of carrying. Its gleam seemed to steady his breathing. In that glow, the room's noise blurred to a gentle hum, like a porch swing creaking in the evening. Then came a line spoken softly by someone near the gate, but it carried like a headline, "Respect isn't paperwork. It's how a gate opens." The words landed with precision. Phones could have captured them, captions could have spread them, but in that moment it felt like they belonged to everyone present. A viral phrase in waiting, though the veteran himself had said nothing. The applause ebbed, slowly fading into scattered claps, then silence. The PA hum returned, announcing boarding groups with mechanical patience. Life at the terminal resumed, but the air carried a new charge. The youth who had noticed the coin earlier leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to that coin now?" The question hung light yet heavy, echoing the way questions sometimes linger after the hymn ends. It was not answered, not yet. And with that, the chapter of recognition closed, leaving only the sound of a gate standing open, wider than regulation, wider than time. The applause had faded, but the echo of it lived in the walls of the terminal. For a long time, no one said anything. The veteran stood quietly near the glass case where travelers sometimes left tokens of service patches, pins, and coins, no bigger than a thumbprint. The young passenger who had walked beside him since the commotion now held the coin. His hands were steady in the way of someone young but newly aware of weight that was not his own. "Sir," the boy asked softly, "are you sure?" The veteran nodded once. His silence was steady, more powerful than any answer spelled out in words. The nod itself was a gift of trust. The boy stepped forward. His sneakers squeaked faintly on the tile. He slid the coin through the open slot of the display. It landed against the backing with a small metallic note, a sound both ordinary and ceremonial. The glass reflected the coin's surface under the late light of day. Golden beams from the tall windows cast it brighter than its size deserved. Nearby, an airline announcer who had lingered after the gate cleared leaned her head toward the display. Another one, she whispered, her tone free of rules, touched only by respect. A few travelers paused in their stride. They looked at the case where tokens of earlier generations rested in silence. No plaque told the stories. No caption spelled them out. Yet each object spoke, and now the veteran's coin joined the quiet choir. He remained a step back. Shoulders square, head bowed slightly, he let others see the token, but offered no speech. Respect, he knew, was not something a form could stamp. From the speakers overhead, the usual announcement came: final boarding call, thank you for your patience. The words were routine, but today they carried an undertone of closure. The veteran's shoes tapped gently as he turned away, the rhythm of his pace unhurried. A boy had asked a question. A coin had been placed. The rest needed no explanation. Hours later, the desert had replaced the terminal. At his modest home, the porch swing creaked in the warm wind. Crickets called from the dry grass, filling the air with a softer applause. The veteran leaned back, wood pressing against his shoulders, the rhythm of the swing steady as a breath. He closed his eyes. The air smelled faintly of dust and sage. He thought of the board in the airport, the tokens shining under glass, the passengers clapping, and the youth's eyes holding questions deeper than years could answer. The day had been long, yet it settled into silence, as though silence had been waiting for him. He remembered the diner from years ago, the way coffee poured endlessly into chipped mugs, and the way respect sometimes came not in words, but in gestures, an extra refill, a nod across a counter. Now it had come again, only this time through an open gate and the hand of a boy carrying his coin. The wind carried his memory outward, brushing the desert fences, slipping into the sky. In the hush of night, he heard something like a radio voice, warm as a neighbor greeting across a fence line. A quiet thank you lasts longer than medals. The line was brief, but it lingered. It was simple enough to remember, strong enough to keep. The porch boards creaked again. The crickets kept their hymn. And the story, like the coin, remained part of a larger choir of lives, service, and recognition too deep for paperwork to hold. The swing moved gently. His breath rose and fell. The desert stars waited above, bright and patient. Respect, he thought, had found its way home. He left the airport quietly, but not before the youth slid his coin into the glass case where other tokens gleamed under the bright concourse lights. Still in that small sound of metal touching glass, the crowd's memory found its proof like a lamp in a winter window. Then later on, his porch swing, the desert wind carried the hush of applause, and he thought of how kindness needs no return. Respect isn't paperwork, it's how a gate opens. Quietly, his story became part of the board, part of the echo, part of the silence that travels farther than any flight. A quiet thank you lasts longer than medals.